Hey folks, Joe Valley here from the Quiet Light Podcast. Thanks for joining once again. And as always, this podcast is sponsored by Quiet Light Brokerage, an internet business, M&A firm, brokerage firm, whatever you want to call us. We're all entrepreneurs that have built, bought, and sold our own online businesses. And now we're advisors as well. I personally sold close to 100 million in total transactions in the last 8 years. And honestly, I thought that was a big number. And I was kind of impressed with myself until recently. Walker and Brian are about to close a $20 million transaction. Brad has one that he's negotiating 2 offers on that's just under 25. So that 100 million will be dwarfed pretty quickly. When they joined the team, actually, they said Joe Valley's got a target on his back, meaning they were going to overtake me, and they're going to do that very quickly. And I'm just one of 11 folks here, guys. We're here to help first and foremost. We've all built, bought, and sold again. We're entrepreneurs first, but we're here to help you either learn about buying a business or exiting your business. So reach out to us at quietlightbrokerage.com. Check out our listings. Get a free valuation. Odds are your business is your most valuable asset, and you don't really know what it's worth. Speaking of worth, I've got Bob Serling on the podcast here today. Bob, thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Very, very impressive resume, folks. Bob is the founder of LicensingLab. Let me just drop some names like Tony Hawk, Microsoft, developer of insurance products that he's licensed that he doesn't even know all that much about insurance. He's a lifelong marketer. Marketer. Goes back to, get this, some of you might not know what it is, but direct mail. Yes, direct mail. Understood when I said I was in the radio DR business. He understood that DR meant direct response and got it. This is a man with wisdom and experience. Bob, thank you for joining the Quiet Light Podcast. Appreciate it.
Great to be here, Joe, and thanks so much for that intro.
I always like to throw out the fact that when I've got another guest with a little bit of gray hair, that I've got to throw that out there for those not watching and just listening. Hey, it's experience, right?
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, it's something along those lines. Give us a little bit more of your backstory, because look, you developed this product that the Tony Hawk's company or the company that sponsored him or worked with him licensed. You've got a ton of experience with courses in online marketing, a bunch of different things. But how did it really all start in the entrepreneurial world for you?
It actually started with a job that I hated, and I did not go to college. I didn't like school. I barely got through high school. And so for the first 5 or 6 years after barely making it through high school, I just bummed around the country and goofed off and had a good time and had a bunch of odd jobs, and eventually landed out in West Hollywood and took up with a bunch of guys who we basically kept odd jobs so we could go body surfing every day. And that was our main goal in life. And believe it or not, there's still a lot of people in Southern California who live that way. Fortunately, I broke the pattern when I was in my mid-20s. So what happened was I just ended up taking the first job I could get, and it was totally by accident. A friend of mine said, "Hey, I'm learning to program computers. Do you want to learn? It pays really well." And I said, "Sure, why not?"
Wow.
If somebody would have said, "Do you want to learn to climb to the top of redwoods and pick pine cones for a living?" I would have said yes to that too. I didn't have a lot of direction. Anyway, I started doing that, and after a while I ended up working as a programming manager at a very large bank out here on the West Coast. And it was really boring. I hated almost every minute of it. And part of what I had to do was train the programmers. And in those days, all the big companies used IBM mainframes. And their manuals were so dense and so difficult to understand that it was hard for me to train the team. So I started taking sections of the manuals and just rewriting them and putting them into normal English and throwing in a little humor here and there. And somehow the bank's PR department got a hold of that, of one of my manuals, and said, do you want to write a press release for us? And I said, sure. What's a press release? So they gave me some press releases, some samples, and I wrote one and it did well. And then they said, do you want to write an ad for us for our credit cards? I said, yeah, I'll do that. And so from there, then I figured, well, if I'm going to do this, I better learn about it. So I bought a book and it was called How to Write a Great Advertisement by Victor Schwab. Brilliant book. Still, I think, had more effect and affected my career and my life more than probably any other business book I read. So from there, I decided, well, I hate managing computer programmers. I'm going to be an advertising copywriter. So long story short, I put an ad in a little advertising magazine. You may remember Adweek from
Sure.
okay, and that's how copywriters found jobs. And my neighbor who worked for a big ad agency said, you can't do that. You don't have experience. You don't have a book of all these pieces you've written. I said, well, I'm going to try it. I'll invest $100 and see. So I realized that I understood finance from having done these big systems for banks, and I understood technology. And this was the early 90s. The evolution into technology was just starting to grow. So I ran a little ad and it basically offered my services as a copywriter for technical and financial programs. So and I thought, okay, well, great, I'll do these things. So the first job I got from that, I was writing an ad for a big restaurant chain. They just liked how I worded my ad. And so from there, I just kept growing. And so Victor Schwab's book was about writing direct response ads. And I just took off and I started doing that. But coming back to when I was working in the software industry, the thing that IBM did that was absolutely brilliant was that you could not buy their software, you couldn't buy their manuals or their training. It was all licensed. So when you wanted to train a team of, say, 10 programmers, it was $3,000 per programmer. And this goes back to the 90s. The 3,000 was probably equivalent to maybe 20,000 now. And what you got for that 3,000 was a videotape. And you had access to it for a week to sit those programmers down in a room and have them watch the video. And that was the training, and that was a license. And then you had to send it back. And every copy of the videos that IBM had were all marked, and they tracked everything. You couldn't duplicate it, you couldn't steal it. So I went, wow, this is a great model. All they do, they create this training once and they license it over and over and over and over. So when I went back to copywriting, I thought, well, once again, I like marketing, but I kind of dislike copywriting because I'm on my own all the time and I can do it well, but it's kind of boring and labor intensive. What if I take my best ads and my best sales letters and my best space ads, and I just license them to companies, and then I customize them? It'll take me about no more than an hour to customize any piece instead of a week to 2 weeks to write one. I charge them a smaller amount plus a licensing fee, which is a share of the profits. The benefit to them is they get something that's proven rather than having to be a pioneer and test something that's likely to fail. And they only pay when it really works. So that model worked really well. And then I started building it out from there. And then I wrote a program on how to do that, a training course. And then I licensed that course out. And then I just kept licensing from there. And then eventually I moved into professional licensing, which really means inventing products and services and licensing them to big companies. And so, like you said, I did a toy skateboard that I licensed to a big toy company that had a license with Tony Hawk and all these other major skateboarders. And they licensed my model. They put all those pro skateboarders logos on it, sold all over the world. And then I did some other stuff back to the software industry. And then I had a friend in the insurance industry, and she asked me to take a look at a product for her. And I don't understand insurance, but she understood marketing. So she said, this is what people need. This is the problem they need to solve. And that's really what licensing and deal making and strategizing is solving problems. So I was able to solve that problem for her, and that became.
Isn't that what advertising is with your ad copy? Is you identify the problem, your product or service is the solution, and back
That's what it should be. But when you see a lot of the advertising that's out there and it's just terrible, or people create advertising to begin with and find it doesn't work, it's because they aren't looking for something creative, something different, a different positioning, a different mechanism. They're just copying everybody else. Like right now in the online marketing industry, the big thing is these 5-day challenges. But everybody's challenge looks just like everyone else's. And these are supposed to be the leaders of the industry, the creative, the creative pioneers, but it's all Me Too stuff. But your question, is astute, and that's what good marketing is. And that's what good business is solving your customers' problems and digging deeper to really understand and empathize with your customers so you can get them to talk about problems that are much deeper than just the surface stuff that most people talk about. And when you can hit on that, when you get at the heart of that, then you can really create monumental products, services, and marketing.
So your typical client in with LicensingLab and what you do, we're not talking small dollars here when it comes to licensing, which is you're an inventor of the skateboard and you're earning money off of the Tony Hawk license brand there. We're in that particular case, you're talking some pretty serious dollars. For instance, I mean, if I came to you, my wife had created a particular bedwetting product and tried to patent it, and she failed on the patent. It didn't work. But at one point we were thinking, let's just license that out versus doing all the marketing itself. What are your recommendations? And I mean, you've got some experience in this area. Do you think that people should be, no, I think the answer is no. I think I know the answer is going to all the effort of manufacturing the product and then trying to licensing out it. Do you come up with a concept and an idea? What's the process you think someone should go with in that situation?
Well, the process is similar. The way you apply the process is different industry by industry, but essentially, and this is my own bias, I never manufacture anything.
Good for you.
I always want to, and number two, I never create a new product. I always improve an existing product that's selling well. Why? Number one, I don't have to patent it. I don't have to go through that. The company's already patented it, right?
Now, is the company a client that you improve, or
right.
You just find something?
The skateboard toy I did, the toy already existed.
Sure.
I didn't invent the toy itself. I invented an attachment that went on the toy that made it more fun to use. But I knew that toy was selling something like $8 to $10 million worth a year. See, I don't want to be a pioneer, because the pioneer is the guy who gets the arrows in the back more often than not. So
let me ask you a silly, I totally agree there, but this is a silly or novice question, but you're not protected with IP. You're developing that attachment that goes on this toy. What's to prevent the owner of that toy, when you approach them with this attachment and say, hey, you want to license this, to just knock you off and do it themselves if there's no IP?
Well, there's three things. And the main thing is you have to know who you're working with. And the big toy companies, the big insurance companies, the big pet companies, they're nice people. They're just like, I have a ball working with them. They're just like you and me. They're fun to talk to. They're interesting. They have great ideas. So that's number one. And they're honest. Number two, they're paying you a 5% royalty. They'd be stupid to steal from you, because if they get caught stealing from you, number one, it's going to cost them so much more in money. And then with social media, their reputation will be trashed. And if they steal it from you, if I come to a company and they look at an idea, they go, wow, this is really good. We never thought of this. We can add an extra $8 million in sales to our 12 million in sales of this product. They're dumb not to pay me the 5% and then show me 5 other products they have and say, what can you do for these?
Is it, let's talk about the stealing part for a minute. This is the part for a minute. This is, there's 3 things you said here. This is number 2. And this is really interesting and timely because of that whole bedwetting product itself. You don't own any IP. It's just an idea. There's, from a legal standpoint, if they decided to do this on their own, is it stealing or is it just underhanded?
You don't own IP in that you don't have it copyrighted, trademarked, or patented.
Right.
But you keep a track record of the fact that you developed it and you showed it to them. So when you go to the music industry, there's always these lawsuits where people come in and say, oh, this artist stole this part of the tune from me.
Okay, excellent point.
You have this track record.
And that holds up in court. In this case, you've presented this product. Hopefully you're never getting to court.
Yeah,
I just did a podcast this morning and said I've never seen been so.
You know, if it's me, little one-man inventing shop, well, I've got 2 assistants, so a little 3-person inventing shop versus, you know, Megalith Industries, this billion-dollar company that's swatting me like a fly. And I've got this track record, which I've kept. I've kept a record of all my emails, my phone calls, and anything else. I'm going to win 99 times out of 100 if it goes to court, but it doesn't go to court. The other part of it is almost every major business these days, product businesses that is, solicit ideas from outside product developers. And they'll even sign a non-disclosure agreement with you online. That's the other thing you can get. I don't even ask, and I'm not saying people shouldn't ask for a non-disclosure agreement, but I don't ask for them.
This is stunning, honestly. So, you know, most people think you've got to have that design patent, the utility patent, something along the lines there to protect yourself. I was having coffee with a friend of mine that owns a product innovation company. And, you know, I had shared this bedwetting product with him and the design and all this other stuff to see about manufacturing and having, you know, an entrepreneur do it. One, you know, either somebody that's maybe either built or sold their own business through Quiet Light and then hand that off, because I don't want to be in the business.
Right.
You know, I'm in the M&A world. I feel like it's conflict for me. And he said to me the other day, he's like, well, you know, how about so-and-so, because I'd referred somebody to him, doing it, and we'll pay you we'll just pay you a licensing a percentage. And I thought, gosh, he doesn't even have to. What, you know, should I get that? Do I deserve that? Is he just being nice? And what you're saying is, you know, there is, you know, he's obviously being nice. And like,
yeah, no, there is value to something you can prove that sells. Now, if you are going to manufacture, then you do want to get all that protection in place, because there may come a time where you have to protect your idea against other companies knocking you off. But with me, when I'm licensing a product to a big corporation, if someone knocks them off, they're the one that defends the patent, not me.
Or the lack of patent. In this case, you don't have a patent. If somebody,
I don't, but their product was already patented.
their original
And
product.
the other thing is there's a lot of industries where certain products are not even patentable. Novelty products,
Right.
most of them aren't patentable. The majority of toys, they don't bother to patent because the shelf, now puzzles and games are different. Shelf life on puzzles and games are from 5 to 50 years. The shelf life on toys is from 12 to 24 months. And right now, the patent office is backed up about 4 years to issue a patent.
That's crazy.
So it makes no sense to file for a patent on a toy when it only has a 2-year shelf life and your patent won't even issue for 4 years. So if you go to most toy stores, just go in a Walmart or a Target or a local toy store and pick up the toys, you'll see that 90% of them are not patented.
Now I'm going to move on to the third thing of the three, but if you're like me, you probably forgot what it was already, but do you recall there was 3 things in regards to that answer?
Oh, what the third thing was?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was what I already mentioned. It was that
Okay.
you've got this track record. You've got a paper trail. So you can prove that you're the originator of an idea.
I love the
And
idea of not needing that IP. You've got the originator of the idea. I just had no idea that it was defensible in a court of law. And I also love, to be honest with you, the fact that you don't have to manufacture it. Too many people go out and they develop the product, they go manufacture it, and then they try to sell it versus what some folks have done. As I mentioned before we started recording, we've had many Shark Tank folks through the Quiet Light process and a few on the podcast. And one of them talked about, creating the ad copy first and putting the ad copy out there in, some shape or form that's trackable, and they click to get to the buy, to the cart, and then you say it's not available. Just a few podcast episodes ago, I had Roy Moorjohn from Inventus Partners down in Charlotte on the podcast, and Roy's done over $300 million in Kickstarter campaigns.
wow.
For products where they just develop the concept and idea, not necessarily, with IP on it, but they.
Sorry, my chair just gave out on me.
Yeah, for those that are watching, that would have been great. There was a little click, and
would have
Bob's
gone
eyes
all
were
the way
bright,
over.
wide open there, just like it was.
Would have
kind
been
of
great if I went all the way over.
So down at Inventus, they do sort of what the beginnings of what you're talking about. They determine whether or not that product has interest to the public or not with a Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah.
And then and only then do they go out to the manufacturers. And the difference here is that at this stage, instead of going and having the product manufactured, they could seek out a large company that would be interested in licensing. How do you do that part of it, I guess, is where I'm going here.
Well, again, I really advise that people invent in an industry that they either know through previous work experience or they have passion about. So I invent in 3 different industries, and toys, household goods, and pet products. Because those are the things I like. Those are the things I find fun. So when we talked before the call, I mentioned that I had co-invented this very advanced software testing suite. And I did it mainly because it was with a friend of mine who was a brilliant professor at the Graduate School of Education at UCLA. But I didn't enjoy it. It just wasn't much fun because I didn't care that much about it. We made a lot of money from it, but I was glad when we sold, and in that case, he had the full patents. I was glad when we sold the patents and it was over. So, but the thing is, if you invent products to license, and you can license services too, and that's a whole different trail we could go down. But when you invent in an industry that you know and like, it's pretty easy to find you get to know real quickly who's good and who isn't, who's trustworthy and who isn't. And on nearly every website for any company that's valued at 500 million or more, if you scroll to the bottom, you're going to see something that says inventors relations or have a product for us. And you can submit through that, or if you're smarter, you'll find the correct person either through LinkedIn or other paid services, Hoovers and others, where you can find that exact person, their email and their phone number, and go directly to them. So it's not hard to do. The fact is, most major corporations, there's an estimate that in almost every industry, and I'm talking just about physical products right now, no more than 50% of the products you see on a store shelf or on Amazon were invented by that company itself. They were licensed from an outside developer. And it can be an individual developer like me, or it can be teams. There are big development companies that do nothing but that. But the fact is, they're looking for ideas, and they make that contact information available on their websites.
That's fascinating. You know, it just makes sense as you're saying it, but prior to that, it never would have occurred to me just to look at the bottom of the page or find a way to reach out to them directly. Because just like, you know, when we sell a business and they have 2 or 3 manufacturers, but one is the bulk of their product development, and let's say they're all in China, the buyers often say, well, do they have a contract with that manufacturer? And we say, well, 99% of the time, there's no contract with a Chinese manufacturer. Well, where's the protection? The protection is in that manufacturer is in the business to manufacture products for people like you. They need you as much as you need them. It's fascinating how that actually translates here to the big corporations doing 500 million or more in revenue. They need the inventors, the product developers and whatnot, just as much as, you know, we need them to, you know, put those products on the shelves and buy them for.
Yeah, very much so.
That's terrific. Fascinating. Is there a particular reason why you choose that 500 million mark? Is there a certain size company that you try to focus on when you bring them a product innovation or idea or design that you want them to license?
Yeah, well, basically the bigger the better, except I'll usually skip. So, I mean, let's say theoretically there are 20 billion-dollar companies in a given industry. Okay. Let's say it's pet products. I'm not going to deal with number 1 and number 2 because there's more arrogance, there's more comfort there. We don't need a lot of new stuff. We know what we're doing. Well, maybe they do, but 3 years ago, Canon cameras was the number 1 maker of professional and what's called prosumer, high-end consumer cameras. They controlled something like, I think it was like 72% of the market. That was 3 years ago. And they were arrogant and they didn't need to listen to their customers. They're now down to about 35, 40%. Wow. Because Sony and Nikon beat the crap out of them. So I don't go to the top 2. I go to number 3, 4, and 5. But the more money they're making, the better, because the more likely they are to license from you and the more likely they are to bring your product to market quickly. And if I can create an improvement for a product that's already selling $20 million worth and know that my improvement will sell another $10 million worth, I'm going to make a lot more money than if I improve a product for a smaller company that's selling $1 million worth and they're only going to sell another $300,000 worth with my improvement. So
there's a lot of math and logic there. Folks, the key underlying message, if you're not getting it here, is that there's a way to reverse engineer a path to your goal. In this case, Bob's not physically manufacturing the product, and he doesn't have a college degree, yet he's wildly successful. And he's working with companies that are doing nearly $500 million or more in revenue because he now knows that they need him because he's a developer inventor. It's to reverse engineering that path. Not to be afraid to reach out to those folks, because they need you just as much as you need them.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There's always, almost always, in whatever you do, there's a more direct route to things than you might think of. So, in fact, if we want to flip this, if you want to, if I can take over control of the discussion here,
Done.
Joe, and
Go for
flip
it.
this a little to how, because not everybody's an inventor, not everybody's a licenser, but how do you use licensing in your business to make more money with licensing than you make from your core products? And again, it's flipping the way you look at things. And just for a second, I have an inventing course, and it's called Reverse Inventing. It's how do you reverse the process. But for people who have product businesses or service businesses or e-commerce businesses, the flip, and you and I talked about this pre-call, the flip is that in most industries, if you ask people what they want, the number one thing they want is more traffic. If they're a little more sophisticated at marketing, they say, I want a funnel that converts better. And on and on and on. And so they end up chasing traffic tricks and traffic hacks and funnel hacks and technology tricks and hacks. But every day, in fact, Perry Marshall, who is probably the leading authority on Google AdWords, in the last 2 months, and one came out today, Perry has published bulletins about massive changes to Google ads that are going to flatten your results. Yet people are still chasing those things. So what I tell them is, again, reverse it. Look, turn that lens around. Where's the real value in your business? It's not through new traffic, and not that you don't need new traffic, but if you shift the focus, most companies are focused about 80 to 90% on new traffic and conversion.
Mm-hmm.
But the real money for a company is in making more sales to their existing list. And as I had mentioned when we talked earlier, Harvard Business Review released a study that said making sales to the people who are already on your list is as much as 25 times easier than converting new traffic to a sale. And it's as much as 90% more profitable. Why? Well, you're not spending all the time and money on that traffic. You're lucky if you can get 2% of the traffic you pay for to convert. And when you do that, you're investing enormous amounts of time and money. That means 98% of the money you invest in traffic is down the drain immediately.
Well,
so
it goes to owning the customer list very, very much so.
Exactly. So I work with companies, and I help them use licensing and creative thinking to get the most out of their list. And so I've got clients who are making 180% more from their secondary products by working their list properly than they are from their main products. And then the best example, and this is not mine, but this is brilliant. There's a company, I believe, well, they're in the Midwest. I think it's Springfield, Ohio. They're called Springfield Remanufacturing Company. And they buy blown up engines of large equipment, tractors, backhoes, all that kinds of stuff. They remanufacture it and they sell them, cheaper than buying a new engine. They do $14 million a year in business building out blown up engines. Pretty good. They do $220 million in business by leveraging the assets that they already have and turning those assets. So they've taken all the skills they've gained and they've created spin-off companies and training programs. They train other companies in procurement management, in metal treatment, in accounting systems for manufacturing, IT systems for manufacturing, marketing systems for manufacturing, and they sell and train in those areas all over the world. And as I said, 14 million from their core product, 220 million by understanding the assets they already have that they were overlooking and doing nothing with. And every company can do that.
Every company, even as we're looking at companies that we work with often, again, in the I guess it's getting up to sub $25 million in total value. We've got folks that have bootstrapped an e-commerce business or a SaaS business, and they're 2, 3, 4 years in. They've got assets that you can help them look at and how to create money from those assets that are not just driving more traffic and other, selling more.
And the greatest asset you have is always your list. But let's talk about some other not so obvious. If you have a really great e-commerce or SaaS company, why not clone it? Create a second company with a different name and use a different emotional appeal in your copy to sell the same thing. Now, number one, it's really easy to do. Number two, it's very profitable. I'll give you 2 examples. I have one client who has I'm drawing a blank on, let me talk about. So I have one client who sells baker supplies online. It's an e-commerce company. And it's baking tins and rolling pins and all these equipment. They do really well. They for a fairly small company, I think they do about 4 million a year in sales. So what we did with them was we spun that off into a second company that was looking for small businesses, small bakeries and things, and caterers and companies like that wanted to buy those things in bulk, not onesies, twosies. And so we created a second company. I call it profit cloning. We cloned their company with a different appeal. So instead of appealing to the individual baker, this is more to the smaller businesses, like the wedding halls and the meeting halls and smaller bakeries. Just by doing that, within the first week, their profits nearly doubled. And they've maintained that for, I think it's almost 4 years now.
It's interesting. It's actually doing it in a more thorough, effective way that sends a better message to that end customer versus a little link at the bottom of the website that says buy in bulk or something along those lines.
And so here's another one that's kind of interesting. I had a client, and he's a former engineer, and he came up with a day trading formula, which he engineered and improved, and it's very safe and very effective. So he started making that available and was doing well. He was selling a couple $1 million a year worth of it. But he was really frustrated because other companies, whereas he was selling 2 million, other companies were selling 6 to 10 million a year with a very emotional appeal of, get rich overnight with day trading. Yeah, but there's also a lot of risk. His whole thing was, there's no risk in my method. You're going to build wealth slowly, not get rich quick. So he said, it's just so frustrating that they're taking all these customers from me. So great, let's use profit cloning, create a second site, hire a copywriter to take your exact copy, but rewrite it with a real emotional appeal instead of the logical appeal you use, and sell the exact same product. No different. At first I asked him, would your product work for that quick buck trade as well? He said, absolutely. Said, well, then we don't even have to change the product or the name. So he did that. He brought it up. Within a month, he had increased his profits by 40%. It then grew over the year to about 60%. This is 8 years later, and they still, like clockwork, without thinking about it, make 60% more profit than they ever would have before.
Goodness. That's a huge
So
profit margin.
that's one thing.
I like the idea of profit cloning, instead of reinventing the wheel each time, take what you've got and duplicate it with a different, unique message to maybe a slightly different customer. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. One that you wouldn't have captured before with the existing messaging. And that all goes back to your copywriter days, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, everything kind of interweaves together.
It sure does. So we're running a little bit short on time. Tell me more about, real quickly, reverse inventing and what the course is all about, because that sounds fantastic.
Okay, actually, we could, but I think if your audiences are mainly people who are building businesses and want to add more value to their business.
LicensingLab.
Yeah, and inventing is tougher. I mean, first of all, even when you place an invention, you're not going to see your royalties for 2 to 3 years.
Right.
That's how long it takes to get shelf space. And not that many people, inventing is a bigger step further away than just developing your business. I think what would really be of value to your listeners would be if I fall off my chair again, number one, but to talk about ways to really utilize their list to add a lot more profit to their business with very little effort, and often do it almost on autopilot. And when you do it, it's at 100% profit margin.
I think it's a brilliant idea because they should already own that list and can just maximize the value of it. How do they find you online? What's the best website to go to?
Go to LicensingLab.com, and the homepage there is a form where you can get my free ebook called The Tollgate Licensing Solution, and it shows you 11 different ways, some of which we talked about today, to take the assets you already have and turn them into 6-figure profit centers, most of which is passive income. That's the best way to find me and get more information.
I think I might do it myself with my my wife's bedwetting product there, now that I know that I can actually license it out. Real quickly, for those that are thinking, well, yeah, but how much? You had said 5% a little while ago. Is that a rough?
Pretty standard in most industries.
Okay.
It's usually from 3 to 9%.
Okay.
9%, you're only going to get that if you have a really long track record of success, or if you're a celebrity. So on the Tony Hawk skateboard, I think I got 4%. The company got about 16%. Tony Hawk got 25%. And the other skate personalities got the rest of it. So it all depends on each situation, but for practical purposes, 5% is a good number to use.
Good. Simple math there, folks. Take the list that you do have and make some money out of it. You've developed these assets that are sitting there, and you're focused on driving traffic and top line revenue. You've already got some assets that you can maximize profit on. According to Harvard Business Review, 90% more profitable than the existing products that you sell. Go to LicensingLab.com. Check out the ebook. Definitely download it. There's 11 things there that Bob's talked about a little bit here, touched on the podcast. Bob Serling, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Look forward to having you back on the podcast again soon.
Thanks for having me, Joe. I really appreciate it.
You bet.